Something happened to you that you've never fully explained. Not the big thing, not the obvious failure or the visible loss, the quieter one. The moment where a door closed that you didn't even know you'd been walking toward until it shut. And you stood there in the aftermath doing what people do. You called it bad luck. You called it bad timing. You told the story to someone who nodded and said those things happen, and you nodded back and filed it somewhere inside yourself under the category of life being unfair. But it never quite settled. Because part of you not, the logical part, not the part that reads self-help books and knows all the right frameworks, the deeper part, the part that operates below the language you use to explain yourself to other people, that part never fully accepted the random explanation. That part kept returning to it. In the shower. At 2 a.m. In the middle of conversations about something else entirely. Like a loose thread that your mind kept finding and pulling, not knowing what it was attached to. You've had more than one of those moments. The job that didn't come through. The relationship that ended in a way that still doesn't make complete sense. The opportunity that dissolved before you could reach it. The version of yourself you were so certain you were becoming and then, quietly, weren't. And the story you've been told, the one our entire culture agrees on, is that life is chaos, that outcomes are largely determined by forces outside your control, that the wise move is to accept randomness, stay humble about your expectations, and be grateful for what lands in your direction. What if that story is the most expensive lie you've ever believed? Not because the universe is secretly conspiring in your favor. That's the other lie, the comfortable one. But because what you've been calling random has a pattern. And the pattern has been trying to tell you something for years. The question is not whether you've been paying attention. The question is whether you've been willing to understand what you've been seeing. There is a force operating in your life that does not announce itself. It does not send memos. It does not show up in the moments of obvious success or failure with a label that says, this is what this is. It works through subtlety, through sequence, through the arrangement of events over time in a way that only becomes legible in retrospect and only to people who have learned to read it. Most people never learn to read it, not because they're incapable, because they've been given the wrong framework for what their life is. They've been told their life is a series of events, some good, some bad, mostly random, with a few decisions scattered throughout that they control. Under that framework, the goal is to maximize the good events and minimize the bad ones, to make smart decisions when the opportunity arises, and to accept the rest with appropriate grace. Under that framework, what you are is a receiver. A person to whom things happen. And everything you've tried, every system, every habit, every self-improvement strategy has been built on top of that framework without ever questioning it. Which is why none of it has worked the way you needed it to. You were installing new software on an operating system that was fundamentally wrong. Because here is what Napoleon Hill understood. Not as a spiritual belief, but as an observed reality across hundreds of the most consequential lives he ever studied. Your life is not a series of events. It is a preparation sequence. And the preparation sequence does not care about your timeline. It does not respond to your impatience or your frustration or your feeling that things should be moving faster. It responds to one thing only, your readiness. And it will keep handing you variations of the same experience, the same obstacle, the same relational pattern, the same internal collapse until the lesson inside that experience has been fully absorbed. Not intellectually, not as a concept you can explain. Absorbed at the level of your character. This is the enemy that has no face and no name in most people's lives. Not a person, not bad luck, not the economy, or the circumstances, or the industry you're in. The enemy is the belief that you are separate from the preparation, that the hard things that have happened to you were interferences rather than instructions. That belief is costing you everything, because while you have been treating your setbacks as interruptions to your story has been trying to build you. And every time you explained away the experience without receiving what it contained, the preparation sequence reset, not as punishment, as repetition. The way a teacher does not move to the next lesson until the current one has been genuinely learned. You have felt this. You have looked at your life at certain moments and noticed the pattern, the same type of situation arriving in different costumes, the same dynamic in different relationships, the same point of collapse in different projects, the same emotional response to different versions of the same pressure. And you probably did what most people do when they notice that pattern. You blamed the recurring cast of characters, the type of person you attract, the type of industry you're in, the type of luck you carry. What you didn't do, what almost no one does, is ask the question the pattern was actually asking. Not, why does this keep happening to me? But, what is this trying to finish building? Because that is what the pattern is. It is not evidence of your damage or your deficiency or your cosmic misfortune. It is the preparation sequence returning to the unfinished room. The one where something essential to the person you are becoming has not yet been forged. And here is why this enemy is so difficult to name and so nearly impossible to escape without help. The belief in randomness is not just a philosophical position. It is a psychological defense mechanism. If your setbacks are random, then they say nothing about you. They require no inventory. They demand no honest confrontation with what you have not yet developed. They can be metabolized as bad luck and released without the discomfort of genuine examination. But if nothing in your life is random, if every experience has been preparation, then you are accountable to your own history in a way that is deeply uncomfortable. Because it means the things you've been calling obstacles were actually mirrors. And the reason you haven't moved past certain points is not that the path was blocked. It is that you haven't yet become who the next part of the path requires. That realization, sitting with it fully rather than deflecting it, is the thing most people cannot do. And the inability to do it is the wall. The invisible, unacknowledged wall that no morning routine, no productivity system, and no motivational framework has ever been able to address. Because the wall is not outside. It never was. Here is the version of you that exists at the end of a long week when nothing went the way it was supposed to. You sit with it. And there's a voice, not dramatic, not hysterical, just quiet and persistent, that begins the audit. Everything you haven't built yet. Every conversation where you said the wrong thing or nothing at all. Every decision you made from fear disguised as reason. Every morning you started with intention and ended having spent the day managing the surface of your life instead of actually living it. And the audit doesn't stay in the past, it reaches forward. You start doing the arithmetic on your future. How old you'll be before any of this changes, whether it will change, whether you actually have what it takes to make it change. And the arithmetic always lands in the same uncomfortable place. You don't know. You genuinely don't know. And the not knowing is not peaceful. It is its own kind of suffering, the suffering of a person who can see the destination but cannot locate themselves on the map. This is the internal landscape of someone in the middle of a preparation sequence they haven't recognized as one. Because here's what it feels like from the inside. It feels like stagnation. It feels like the same ground over and over. You make a move, something happens, you end up back where you started or somewhere that feels indistinguishable from it. And you try to maintain the belief that progress is happening, that things are moving in ways you cannot see, but the belief gets harder to hold the longer it goes without evidence. So you do what intelligent, self-aware, genuinely motivated people do when they're stuck. You diagnose. Maybe the strategy is wrong, so you change the strategy. You find a new approach, a new system, a new model to study. You implement it with genuine commitment. For a while, the implementation itself feels like progress, and that feeling is real, because motion always feels better than stillness. But then, the same point of collapse. The same internal resistance appearing in the same circumstances. the same pattern completing itself despite the new container you built around it. And you conclude again that the strategy was wrong, or that you are wrong, or both. This loop has a specific emotional signature that you know intimately. It starts with genuine hope, not manufactured hope, real hope, the kind that lives in your chest. And it builds through the early stages of action where everything feels possible and the momentum is real. And then it hits the wall. Not a dramatic wall, a quiet one. The place where the work starts to cost more than its return, where the results thin out, where the gap between effort and outcome becomes impossible to ignore. And in that place, something happens that most people never examine closely enough to understand. The gap doesn't just create discouragement. It creates a question. A deeply personal, rarely spoken question that sounds something like, does this mean I'm not the person I thought I was? Because the unspoken contract in most self-improvement philosophy is this: if you do the right things with sufficient commitment, the results will confirm that you are someone who deserves results. Success becomes identity validation. And when success doesn't arrive on schedule, what gets threatened is not just the goal, it's the self. So the self protects itself. It finds explanations that preserve its image while explaining the gap. The timing was wrong. The market shifted. The people involved let it down. The strategy needed adjustment. And these explanations are often partially true, which makes them perfectly designed to prevent the deeper examination, because the deeper examination would require sitting with this. What if the thing that keeps collapsing is not the strategy? What if it's something in the builder? Not a flaw, not a deficiency, a gap, a specific identifiable thing that has not yet been developed. A quality, a capacity, a level of internal organization that the next phase of the work requires and that you do not yet have. Not because you are insufficient as a person, but because you have not yet been through the experiences that build it. And here is where the loop becomes a closed system, because the experiences that would build it are the exact experiences you have been trying to avoid or escape from as quickly as possible, or reframe as quickly as possible so they stop hurting. The disappointment you've been medicating contains the medicine. The setback you've been trying to recover from as fast as possible is the place where the recovery actually happens. The relationship that ended in confusion had a clarity inside it that you didn't stay long enough in the discomfort to receive. The project that collapsed had a lesson at the exact point of collapse that you bypassed in your urgency to rebuild. And so the preparation sequence repeats, not because life is cruel, because the material was not yet gathered, and you are running out of patience for the repetition without understanding what the repetition is for, which is the most dangerous place to be. Because the response to repetition without understanding is not usually deeper inquiry. It is louder effort, more action, more speed, more strategy changes, more performance of progress. And all of that motion displaces the stillness that the sequence actually requires from you. The irony is almost unbearable. The thing you need to do to break the loop is the one thing the loop makes feel most impossible. Before we get to what actually works, let's be honest about what has been offered to you and why it consistently falls short. You've been told that the solution to feeling stuck is vision. Get clear on what you want. Make it vivid. Make it specific. Write it down in present tense as if it's already real. And the advice is not wrong, vision matters, but it is catastrophically incomplete when taught the way it usually is. Because vision without an understanding of the preparation process is just aspiration. And aspiration without readiness is not a catalyst. It is a source of chronic dissatisfaction. It shows you where you want to go while doing nothing to address why you cannot yet sustain the journey. The person with the vivid vision who does not understand preparation spends years feeling the gap between the vision and the reality more intensely than someone who has no vision at all. The vision doesn't pull you forward if you haven't yet become the person the vision requires. It just makes the distance more visible. Then you were told the answer is action. Stop overthinking. Start before you're ready. Execution over perfection. Done is better than perfect. And again, there's truth here. But action without the internal organization that gives action its direction produces motion, not progress. You have already experienced this. You have taken enormous amounts of action in your life. You are not someone who fails to act. You are someone for whom action has not yet produced the cumulative result you know is possible. That is a different problem than the one hustle culture is treating. Then the journaling, the gratitude practices, the meditation, the attempts to clear the internal noise. And these are not useless. The internal work is real, and it matters. But the version most people practice has been stripped of its actual mechanism. They use these practices to feel better, to regulate the emotional state, to reduce the friction of daily life. And they succeed at that. You feel slightly more centered, slightly less reactive. But the practices have not been connected to the actual question they need to serve, which is, what is this specific season of difficulty preparing me for? Because that question transforms everything. It transforms the journaling from mood management into genuine inquiry. It transforms the setback from a problem to be solved into a teacher to be understood. It transforms the pattern you keep repeating from evidence of your brokenness into a signal pointing at the specific development that your next phase requires. But no one taught you to ask that question. They taught you to ask, how do I feel better? How do I perform better? How do I get past this faster? Every false solution you've been handed had the same fundamental error. It was oriented toward bypassing the preparation rather than completing it, getting past the hard thing faster, minimizing the time spent in difficulty, optimizing the recovery. And each of those approaches, well-intentioned as they are, trains you to treat the preparation as an inconvenience rather than the actual work. The actual work is not what you build. The actual work is who you become while building it. And the tools you've been given were not designed to make you who you need to become. They were designed to make you feel like you're already becoming it, which is a profoundly different thing. Feel the distinction, because on the other side of it is the only thing that has ever actually worked. There is a story Hill told, not in his most famous book, that almost never makes it into the summaries or the motivational clips. He was sitting with a man who had failed 7 times, not stumbled, failed, lost everything, rebuilt, and lost everything again, across 7 distinct attempts at 7 distinct ventures. And by every external measure, by every logical assessment of the evidence, this man should have concluded that he was not someone for whom success was available. But Hill noticed something. He noticed that each failure had been different, not in the external circumstances, those varied wildly, but in where the collapse happened. The first failure happened at the point of original conception. The second happened at the point of initial execution. The third at the point of early adversity, and so on. Each failure was happening later in the sequence than the one before it. The man was not failing in the same place. He was failing at the next place, which meant he had mastered every place before it. Which meant that 7 failures had built, invisibly and without his recognition of it, a nearly complete set of capacities. He needed one more. The capacity to hold his own belief in himself under sustained pressure without external validation. That was the one thing the 7 failures had been preparing. And the moment he recognized it, not just intellectually, but at the level of understanding what the preparation had actually cost him and what it had built, something in his architecture completed. The 8th attempt did not fail. This is not a story about persistence for its own sake. Persistence without understanding is stubbornness. This is a story about the way preparation works when you are paying the right kind of attention to it. When you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this completing in me? Hill called this the philosophy of infinite intelligence, the idea that there is an organizing intelligence operating through the circumstances of your life that is not random, not indifferent, and not punishing. It is preparing. It is always preparing. and it will use whatever is available: pleasure, pain, loss, gain, solitude, connection, failure, success with complete neutrality, selecting whatever experience will most efficiently build what the next phase requires. You do not have to believe in the metaphysics of that to use it. You only have to be willing to look at your history differently than you have been looking at it. The shift is this: every hard thing that has happened to you has a payload, a specific retrievable piece of development that it was carrying, and you either received that payload or you didn't. If you did, the preparation moved forward. If you didn't, the preparation will return to that lesson. This is the turning point, not as a belief system, as a practice. Starting now, not as a future intention, but as an actual shift in the question you bring to your own life. What if nothing that has happened to you was random? What if the pattern you've been calling bad luck was actually a curriculum? What if the specific failures, the specific losses, the specific recurring obstacles in your life were not obstacles at all, but the most direct route to the person you've been trying to become? What has your hardest chapter been building in you? Say it in the comments. Not the story of what happened, what it built, even if you're not sure yet. Especially if you're not sure yet. The first principle Hill embedded most deeply in the lives he studied was what he called organized thinking, and it is almost nothing like the productivity system the phrase sounds like. Most people, when they hear organized thinking, imagine someone with a clean desk and a clear schedule and a mind that moves through problems efficiently. That is not what Hill meant. What Hill was pointing at was something far more fundamental: the difference between a mind that is arranged around a purpose and a mind that is arranged around a reaction. A reactive mind is not a weak mind. It can be highly intelligent, deeply analytical, enormously capable, but it is organized around the incoming, the problems that arrive, the circumstances that demand attention, the crises that need management. And because it is organized around the incoming, it is always being defined by external forces. It shapes itself to the pressure of the moment. It produces responses, not direction. A purposeful mind is organized around something that does not change when circumstances change. And because it has a fixed center, it can receive the incoming without being restructured by it. It processes problems as data rather than identity threats. It can hold adversity without being collapsed by it. And most critically, it recognizes preparation sequences because it is paying attention to development rather than just outcomes. Most people who fail to progress are not failing because of a lack of effort or a lack of intelligence. They are failing because their mind is organized around the wrong thing. It is organized around arriving at the destination, at the result, at the condition of having made it. And because the arrival is the organizing principle, everything that is not arrival reads as failure. What this feels like in real life, when you genuinely reorganize your thinking around development rather than arrival, is a shift in what you notice. You stop measuring days by what was produced and start measuring them by what was learned. Not as a consolation prize when production is low, as a genuine primary metric. And that shift changes the data your mind is collecting, which changes the conclusions your mind is drawing, which changes the actions your mind is willing to take. The specific mental shift is this: every morning before you assess what you need to produce today, ask what this period of your life is developing. Not in vague terms, in specific ones. What capacity? What quality? What form of internal organization is this exact season of difficulty designed to build? And then orient your effort not toward the output, but toward becoming the person the output requires. The output will follow. It always follows when the builder becomes adequate to what they are building. But the builder cannot become adequate while organizing themselves entirely around the building. There is something Hill observed in all the people who had completed this shift that he found almost eerie. They stopped being surprised by difficulty. Not because they expected failure, they expected success deeply and specifically. But because they understood that difficulty was the mechanism of preparation, not the interruption of it. And a person who is not surprised by difficulty is a person who cannot be stopped by it, which sets up the second principle in a way that should unsettle you, because the second principle requires you to apply the first one to the most uncomfortable material available, your own history. He'll call this the practice of accurate thinking. And the word that matters is accurate, not positive, not reframed, not reconstructed to feel better. Accurate. Most people who have worked in self-improvement have learned to reframe their past, to find the silver lining, to identify the lessons and extract the meaning and build a narrative that is coherent and forward-facing and emotionally manageable. And that practice is better than bitterness. But it is not accurate thinking. It is emotional regulation disguised as reflection. Accurate thinking about your past means sitting with your actual history without the story you've layered over it. Not to suffer, not to stay, but to read what is actually there. Because when you look at your history without the narrative management, the preparation sequence becomes visible in a way that is almost shocking. You can see the recurring point of collapse, the specific place, in the specific type of situation where you have consistently come apart. You can see the pattern across relationships, across projects, across the versions of your ambition. And you can see, often with a clarity that is uncomfortable, what quality of character would have allowed you to hold together at that specific point. That quality is not a mystery. It was never a mystery. It is the thing you have always, in your most honest moments, known you needed to develop. The thing you've been circling. The thing you keep meaning to address but find reasons to approach indirectly. Accurate thinking is the practice of naming it, without softening, without self-protection, without the comfortable conclusion that it was mostly external forces. What has it been? What is the specific quality that your preparation sequence has been trying to build? Because that question, answered honestly, is a map. And the third principle is what you do with the map. Hill called it specialized knowledge, and again, not in the way it's usually taught. The internet version of this principle says, become an expert in your field. Develop deep skill. Know more than your competitors. And that advice has merit in its context, but it is not what Hill was actually pointing at. What Hill observed was that the highest achievers he studied had developed a very specific kind of knowledge that was almost invisible. Knowledge of themselves. Not psychological knowledge in the therapy sense, though some of that too. Operational self-knowledge. Precise understanding of how they specifically worked. What conditions produced their best thinking. What specific fears most consistently distorted their judgment? What exact type of situation triggered their collapse pattern? What the early warning signs of their own derailment looked like before the derailment, not after. This kind of self-knowledge is rare, because it is earned in only one way. By paying attention to yourself under pressure with the specific intention of understanding the mechanism, not just surviving the pressure, understanding it. What exactly is happening when you collapse? What is the precise sequence of internal events that leads from the initial difficulty to the eventual disengagement? Where exactly does it start? Because if you can identify where it starts, you can interrupt it there. Not through willpower. Willpower arrives too late, at the level of the trigger, before the cascade begins. The mental shift is this. Every time you find yourself at the familiar point of collapse, the one you've been to before, in slightly different costumes, instead of trying to push through it or recover from it, stop for long enough to study it. With genuine curiosity, not judgment. What is happening right now? What specifically am I afraid of at this moment? What is the story my mind is telling about what this difficulty means? And what does that story have in common with the last time I was in this place? The answer will not always be immediately available, but the practice of asking changes your relationship to the collapse. It transforms you from someone experiencing it to someone observing it. And the observer position, held consistently, is where genuine self-knowledge lives, which creates the capacity for the fourth principle. Hill called it applied faith, but not faith in the religious sense, and not faith as optimism or positive expectation. Faith as the operational decision to continue acting in alignment with your purpose when there is no external evidence that the action is working. This is the principle that most people encounter, misunderstand, and abandon, because the version they've been taught says, believe that it's coming, feel that it's already here, act as if it's already real. And there is a kernel of truth in that the identity precedes results mechanism is real. But the way it's usually taught strips it of what makes it operational. Applied faith, in Hill's actual framework, is not a feeling you generate. It is a decision about the relationship between evidence and action. Most people allow evidence to determine action. When evidence is positive, results are coming, momentum is building, the external world is cooperating, they act. When evidence is absent or negative, they slow down, reconsider, revise their beliefs about what is possible. Evidence leads, action follows. Applied faith reverses this. Action leads. Evidence follows. Not because you ignore reality, accurate thinking requires that you don't, but because you understand that evidence of readiness has never preceded transformation in the history of human achievement. The evidence always comes after the commitment. The proof always follows the action. And the person who waits for the evidence before committing will spend their entire life in the anteroom. What this feels like in real life is a kind of groundedness that people around you will not fully understand. When things are not working, you do not stop. Not because you are delusional about the state of things. You see it clearly, more clearly than most, because accurate thinking has trained you to. But because you understand that the current absence of results is data about where you are in the preparation sequence, not data about whether the destination is real. And the fifth principle is the one that holds all the others together. Hill called it coordination of effort, but what he was actually describing is something far more intimate than collaboration strategy. He was describing the state of a human being who is no longer divided against themselves. Because here is the thing about every principle discussed before this one. They can all be understood intellectually and still fail to produce change. You can have a clear purpose and still act against it. You can have accurate thinking and still let emotion override the clarity. You can have self-knowledge and still choose the familiar collapse over the harder truth. The reason for this is not weakness of character. It is internal division. The part of you that knows what needs to happen is not fully in charge of the part of you that takes action. Those two parts are operating from different maps, different values, different timelines, and until they are brought into genuine coordination, not forced into agreement, but genuinely aligned, all the other principles operate at partial capacity. The coordination Hill was pointing at is the result of the preparation sequence completing. When you have received the lessons in the experiences that contain them, when you have done the accurate thinking about your actual history, when you have developed the self-knowledge that comes from studying yourself under pressure, the internal division begins to close. Not because you defeated the resistant part of yourself, because you finally understood what it was protecting you from, and you addressed that rather than trying to override it. And the person on the other side of that coordination is different in a way that is almost impossible to describe from the outside of it. They are not a better version of you. They are a completed version of a development that has been underway for longer than you have been consciously aware of it. And everything, every failure, every collapse, every recurring pattern, every door that closed, every plan that fell apart, every single thing was part of that completion. Nothing was random, not one moment of it. You know what happens now. You have felt it before. The moment after clarity arrives is not peace. It is the loudest the old system has ever been, because clarity is a threat, not to you, to the architecture that has been running you. And the architecture does not go quietly. It will not concede with a nod and a graceful exit. It will fight for its survival with the only weapon it has. It will make the clarity feel wrong, not obviously wrong. Not so wrong that you can dismiss it easily. Wrong in the specific, personalized way that your particular history makes believable. It will reach back into everything you've tried and failed, and it will present that history as evidence against the shift. Look how many times you've thought you understood. Look how many fresh starts you've made. Look at who you actually are when things get hard. And you will listen, not because you are weak, because the voice knows you. It has been with you longer than any of the ideas in this video. It knows your specific failures in their specific detail, and it will deploy that knowledge with surgical precision at the exact moment when the new understanding is most vulnerable. You will feel in the days after this a pull toward the familiar. Not because the familiar is good, you know it isn't, but because the familiar is known, and your nervous system, under the pressure of genuine change, will generate a preference for known suffering over unknown possibility. That preference will feel like wisdom. It will feel like the voice of experience saying, "Don't get carried away. Don't fall for another thing that sounds good on a screen," and you will want to agree with it. Here is the truth about that voice. It is not your enemy. It was built by you over years to protect you from pain. It is doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is not that it exists. The problem is that it was calibrated for a version of your life that you are no longer willing to inhabit, and it has not yet received the update. The update does not come through argument. You cannot reason the old system into compliance. Every time you try to argue with it, you give it an audience, which gives it energy. The update comes through repeated action that the old system predicts will fail and doesn't. Not dramatic action, not the kind that announces itself, the quiet, specific daily decision to receive your experiences as preparation rather than punishment. To bring the question, "What is this building?" to the difficulty instead of the question, "Why is this happening to me?" That question, applied consistently, changes the data your mind collects. And changed data, over time, updates the system. But you will not feel the update happening. That is what makes this period so difficult. The resistance feels the same whether you are winning or losing against it. The doubt does not decrease as you make progress. In many cases, it increases, because the stakes feel more real. You will have days where none of this feels true. Days where the preparation framework feels like a story you told yourself to make the pain mean something. Days where the honest assessment is, "I don't see it. I don't feel it. I am tired, and I have been at this for a long time, and I want to know if it is ever going to change." Those days are not evidence against the preparation. They are part of it. The capacity to hold your purpose on the days when it does not feel real, that specific capacity is itself being built by the days when it does not feel real. There is no shortcut through this. There is no framework that bypasses it. Anyone who tells you there is has either never done the actual work or is selling you something. The internal war is real. The duration is unknown. The outcome is not guaranteed by the decision to engage. Only the decision not to engage guarantees an outcome, and you know which outcome that is. The person you become through this is not the person you imagined when you first started looking for answers. They are quieter than that person, less interested in announcing the transformation, less interested in the performance of having changed, and more interested in the actual state of having changed, which is a different thing entirely, and one that needs no audience. They think in longer time horizons. Not because they are patient in the passive sense, they are not passive, but because they have stopped relating to time as an adversary. They understand, at a level that has been earned by actual experience, that readiness cannot be forced, that the preparation sequence moves at the speed of genuine development, and that the urgency they used to feel about accelerating that sequence was itself evidence of the thing the sequence was trying to build. They handle the same situations differently. Not because they have better strategies, though they do, but because the situation no longer triggers the identity threat it once did. When a project fails, they do not become the project's failure. They receive the information the failure contains and they continue. When someone questions their capability, they do not need to defend or collapse. They can simply assess, is this accurate? And if it is, they learn from it. If it is not, they release it without resentment. They have a relationship with their own history that is neither proud nor ashamed. It is accurate. They can look at every difficult chapter and identify, specifically and without emotional management, what that chapter built. They carry their history as a set of capacities rather than a set of evidence against themselves. And because the history is a resource rather than a weight, they are not spending energy managing it. That energy is available for the actual work. They are not untouched by doubt. The doubt is still there, sometimes, but it has lost its authority. It is not a verdict anymore. It is a signal, one input among many, to be considered and given its appropriate weight and then moved past. The difference between someone paralyzed by doubt and someone who moves through it is not the absence of the doubt. It is the doubt's relationship to the decision. And in this person, the doubt does not get a vote. They fail differently. Not less often, more, because they are attempting more. But the failure does not compound. It does not accumulate into the kind of weight that eventually causes people to stop attempting. Each failure is received, studied, metabolized, and released. The builder remains. The specific attempt is over. The next one begins with everything the previous one taught. They have stopped waiting to feel ready. Not because they are reckless, they are not reckless. They are more careful than ever, because they understand what they are building now. But because they have completed the preparation that required feeling ready as a precondition. The preparation showed them, through direct experience repeated until it was no longer deniable, that readiness is not a feeling. It is the accumulated result of preparation received. And they know, with a certainty that is not confidence in the bravado sense, but confidence in the structural sense, that nothing that has happened in their life was wasted. Not a single chapter, not a single failure, not a single door that closed, a single relationship that ended, a single plan that fell apart. Everything was building toward this. The specific version of this person, in this moment, with these capacities, organized for this work. The preparation was always this precise. You just couldn't see it until now. You've been calling it bad luck for a long time. You've been calling it the wrong timing, the wrong circumstances, the wrong people in the wrong positions at the wrong moments. You've built an entire personal mythology around the idea that your life has been happening to you rather than for you. And that mythology has been the most expensive story you've ever told. Because the moment you accepted randomness, you accepted powerlessness. And the moment you accepted powerlessness, you stopped looking for the pattern. And the pattern, the preparation sequence running through every single thing that has happened to you has been there the entire time, visible to anyone willing to look with honest eyes. This is not a comfortable idea. If nothing was random, then the failures were instructions you didn't complete. The pain was a teacher you kept trying to medicate instead of hear. The patterns you kept repeating were the curriculum returning to the unfinished lesson. That is a harder story than bad luck. It demands more of you. It offers no one else to blame and no cosmic accident to point at. But here is what it gives you in return for that discomfort. Agency. Real agency. Not the performance of control, the actual recognition that your development is responsive to your engagement with it. That the preparation sequence moves forward when you receive what it's carrying and stalls when you bypass it. That you are not a passive recipient of a random life. You are an active participant in a preparation that has been underway since before you were asking these questions. Everything that broke you had something inside it. You may not have received it yet. You may have carried the weight of the experience without ever opening it. It is not too late to open it. The version of you that the preparation has been building is not finished. It is being built right now. In this season, in this difficulty, in this exact recurring challenge that you are tired of facing. The question is not whether you are being prepared. The question is whether you are finally willing to be. Stop being the person who survives the preparation without receiving it. That person will keep cycling. That person will keep arriving at the same wall. Become the person who looks at the wall and asks not with frustration, but with genuine inquiry, what is this finishing in me? Because the answer is there. It has always been there. And the life on the other side of the answer has been waiting longer than you know. If you're done pretending it's all been random, say so in the comments. One word is enough. And if this is the content your mind has been starving for, you know what to do.